Hello and welcome to today's episode. My name is Anthony Swata. I'm the pastor at Harvey Baptist Church in Stephenville. I almost forgot the name of my town. At Harvey Baptist Church in Stephenville, and I am your host for today's episode of Pastor Talks with Caffeinated Theology. On today's episode, I am joined by my good friend, Dr. David Norman. How you doing, David?
I'm doing very well. Good morning. It might sound like you need more coffee.
I do. I got some here. I'm working through it. We're getting going. And we're also joined by my brother, Sean Wagner, who is a pastor at First Baptist Somerville. Hey, Sean.
Hey, how we doing today? Coming from you to you from Texas, down in College Station here.
I was about to say you are looking very casual to be.
Yeah.
To be in the office.
I'm in my grandfather-in-law's office. He used to run the Panama Canal back in the day, and so he's let me use his office as my family's here at College Station.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, we won't take up too much of your time today, Sean, as you're on vacation and having fun with family. David, what are you up to, man? You look like you're running.
No, not today. Although I do plan on getting on the bike this afternoon. So.
Yeah, buddy. Well, that fits right in with our topic today. And our topic today is the pastor's health. And why is that important? Why is that something we should focus on? Now, before we get into this topic, I want to share a story with you guys. Right out of seminary, right after I finished my Master of Divinity, I got called to a pastorate in a small town, a great church. Loved the church. Smaller church. Baptist church, and if you know anything about Baptist, we can do a lot of things well, but one of the things that we do the best is have awesome potlucks. Mm-hmm. And so we were eating all the time. I was in a small town, pastor in this church, just having the time of my life, and everything was going great. Ministry was going great. God was moving and all that, and the next thing you know, I looked up, and I was about 40 pounds overweight. It killed me. Yeah. It took about 2 years to put on that kind of weight, but man, that's a lot of weight real quick. And the way that I found out that I was that overweight, it never really jumped out at me right at one point, except after I was preaching an Easter service. God was moving in our church. And for Easter that year, we had to go to 2 services because of space requirements and things like that. And I remember after preaching those Easter services, I was done. We had all sorts of family things going on that afternoon. We had, family coming over. We had the Easter egg hunts. We had all that type of stuff for Easter, but I couldn't do it. I was smoked. And it brought me to this point where I knew something had to change. And so today you may find yourself, as you're listening to this episode, in a very similar situation where you're just done. You don't have the energy. You don't have the ability to be able to do ministry effectively. And so this episode's for you. We're going to be talking about the pastor and his health. And so as we look at this, I've just kind of giving you my testimony. I'm going to throw it over to David and Sean to talk a little bit about why the pastor's health is so important.
And I think Anthony brought up one of the biggest aspects of it is capability, being able to lead your people well. So one of the aspects of being overweight that can put a lot of stress on your voice, actually, most people don't always realize that your voice can weaken quite a bit from being out of shape. So if you find yourself always losing your voice, now it could be because you get so impassioned and you're screaming up there, but also it could just be that you've not treated your body properly. And the voice is one of the major aspects of being a pastor. It's the primary means in which we communicate through preaching. So you got to be able to take care of your health.
Yeah, I think the voice is an important component. I would take it a step further and say that there's a sense in which our health as pastors is important to the way that we express the gospel, right? It's just important to our witness. I think that far too often we communicate things, especially, if you think of the image in your mind of most Southern Baptist pastors, which I'm a Southern Baptist, Anthony's a Southern Baptist, Sean's a Southern Baptist, the image in most people's minds when they think about a Southern Baptist is usually an overweight, really upset about something preacher.
In a suit.
He's in a suit, which helps explain why he's sweating so bad. but he's really upset about somebody else's sin. And one of the lines that had stuck with me over the course of the last few years is, if you really want to get a Christian, if you really want to see them just indignant about something, find someone who sins differently than they do. And I think there's a kind of a point to that when we think of a pastor who's preaching against a particular sin, or preaching and he discusses sin. Rarely do we treat gluttony in the same way that we treat other sins. Rarely do we treat obesity in the same way that we treat other illnesses that are the results of lifestyle. And so I know for me, I went through a period similar to Anthony, where when I was pastoring, I turned around one day and looked at the scale, and I was shocked. My health was a wreck. My numbers, my blood work was out of control. And I've never been bigger than I was when I was pastoring. And I knew in that moment that I had to do something. And it wasn't just for my health, and it wasn't just so that I could do what I was doing better, but it was so that the message that I was communicating, the gospel that I was sharing, so that it was holistic in the sense that it was fully orbed. It wasn't, anytime I'm brought and made aware of a blind spot that I might have, I think we all have a responsibility to deal with that blind spot. Yeah. And so that's what I was trying to do.
Absolutely. And it's important as we are engaging in this conversation, this isn't just about making somebody feel bad. So if you're in that position right now where you are overweight and you are out of shape, we're not trying to make you feel bad. We're just trying to share with you some benefits on why this is important. And so it's important, as David was saying, for your witness. As you're standing before people and you're telling them about the dangers of sin, we need to realize that, that sin of gluttony is a real danger in our life. One of the benefits that I find out of trying to live a healthy lifestyle and exercising and stuff is that it helps my mentality. It helps me mentally. Man, I'm kind of high strung. And so there are times whenever I'm in the office and something will go crazy, or I'm carrying a burden for one of my members, or I'm just hitting a wall within my preaching prep trying to hear from the Lord or something like that. There will be times where I'm just like, I have got to get out of the walls of this office and I have got to go do something physically. And I have found that whenever I'm able to kind of work out that stress in my life, able to work out that tension, I guess you could say, through exercise and things like that it'll bring clarity to me. And it'll help me in my prayer time. It'll help me in my sermon prep. It'll help me in all those type of things. And so it's become a real benefit to me just mentally to be able to process through that. And I find that I don't carry those burdens in the same way. Whenever I wasn't doing this, I would carry those burdens home to my family. I would maybe project those burdens onto other congregants or people in my congregation. And so it was really hard. It was really hard. And so those are a few reasons why it's really important. Another one is longevity. As we think through this, another one is longevity. It's very difficult to pastor when you get down the road and things are going crazy. Your numbers are going crazy. As David was saying, maybe your weight's a little bit out of control. Being able to pastor longer, do what we love and what we're called to longer, may have a role in the way that we treat our bodies at the beginning and all the way through our ministries, and not just.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have a longer ministry than you have life. Yeah. And so if you get to the point where worst case scenario, right, or I guess as pastors we would say best case scenario, if you go home to be with the Lord, your time on earth in ministry is over. But one of the things that I'm reminded that Paul said was that if it were up to me, it would be better for me to be with Christ, but it's better for you if I stay. And so in ministry, there's a point in which the longevity of our health, not just of our existence, but our health, it has a direct correlation to our ministry and the fruitfulness of our ministry, right? Because it's one thing for us to be able to be engaged and active and participate in the lives of our people. That's different than someone who's holding on, who can only preach on Sundays, but the rest of the time is laid up because maybe his body just doesn't work the way it used to work. Maybe he's just not healthy enough to be engaged and active.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we recognize, right, that there's diseases and things that come up. We're not talking about that. We're talking about general health, being able to take care of yourself. And we also recognize, the Lord is going to deal with longevity. He does set the bookends of our life, but within that, there's personal stewardship.
Yeah.
And that witness aspect is important there because our nation just does not want to deal with the fact that gluttony is a major issue. And it's very hard to talk about the verses in Proverbs in different places. It's hard to maintain the entire biblical witness with your congregation if you yourself are way out of whack in this area of eating, where your appetite has really become your secret god in many ways. That you're not willing to make a change, or if you're reading the Bible and you say, well, that's talking about someone else, not me.
So we've talked about how this is super important. Your health is super important for your witness, for your capability or your ability in ministry, your longevity in ministry, and also your mentality, how you're thinking in ministry. And so it's important in so many other ways. If you have an idea on how fitness can be important for your ministry, make sure that you post it in the comments below. But let's get going on this next question here. How do we begin to make adjustments? Let's say that I'm that pastor, I'm looking up and going, oh my goodness, I've gained 30, 40, 50 pounds. Where do I go from here? Because it seems like, you're trying to move a mountain at this point. How do I get rid of that?
This is where I was at in January. When I took over about a year and a half ago, we had a baby. And so I went from going to the gym at Southwestern about 5 times a week, about sometimes 2 times in a day, to pastoring and trying to help my wife adjust to having a new baby, as well as having a lot of our senior adult ladies bring over some of the best pies I've ever had in my life.
Hallelujah.
They were amazing. And that chocolate pie that was brought over to my house, I don't think my children had many slices of it. I think that was Dad's. I think that was personal. That was a personal slice of pie. But I gained about 25 to 35 pounds in a year and a half. And all of a sudden was like, why is my knee hurting? Why is my back aching? Why am I out of breath when I'm preaching? What is going on here? And so the first thing I had to do is go, okay, the whole pie doesn't belong to you. The first sensible change is to say, yes, I'm going to participate with my people. I don't want to turn anybody away who's coming and wants to have fellowship with me and brings a dessert of some kind. But I limit that to 1 slice or a smaller slice or 1 scoop of ice cream instead of how much do I want? What will taste good to me? So I started with prayer, actually, by saying, God, help me to understand what is a healthy amount for me, and help me to glorify you in what I'm doing. When does it cross from having fellowship with my people into this is really about me taking comfort in food?
That's a good word. That's a good word. And so I think it's helpful for us to think in terms of diet first, right? What we're putting into our bodies first. Let's talk about that first, because one of the things that in my experience, and it's interesting that this topic, because about 20 years ago, I was certified as a personal trainer. Now that, if you know me now, you'd say that that's surprising, just because of where I am now. But you're never going to out-exercise a bad diet. That's just a reality of it. And so I think for a lot of guys, and let's just talk as guys for a second, a lot of guys, one of the things we want to do is fix it, and we want to fix it by working out, because working out is fun. Working out makes us feel strong. But you're never going to out-exercise a bad diet. And so I think it's important that we talk about diet first. And I think the first step is just to make some sensible, common sense changes. Sean, like what you're saying, the importance of just saying, I'm going to have a smaller piece. Not saying I'm not going to have any pie ever again, but saying I'm going to have a smaller piece of the pie. I'm going to have one. I'm going to limit myself to 1 slice of the pie.
Lying to yourself isn't helpful.
And so there are some different things that people will take. There's some different, what what we define as sensible may vary, right? So for some folks, they're going to say, I'm going to limit my dessert. I'm going to limit my portions. Just finding some smaller changes to make. Honestly, one of the secret, the unknown ways that I was drinking a lot of calories years ago was in sodas. I didn't realize how many calories I was drinking in Cokes or Dr. Peppers. And so just taking a look at that, and one of the ways to do that is and I don't want to get too far ahead, but it's just to track what you're putting in your body. Just to have a food journal, food diary. Just do that for a week and see what you're putting in your body. I think you'll be surprised.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of apps that you can do that with, like MyFitnessPal and all that type of stuff. And so you can go through all that. So we need to clean up our diet. For me, I'll tell you that I can't have it around me. One of the things that I did is I just started removing it out of my kitchen. Man, if I have a pack of Oreos, like one of those big sleeves of double stuffed Oreos, that's my kryptonite. And if I have that in my pantry, I will knock off a full pack of Oreos without a doubt in like a day and a half. I can't do it. And that's not good.
I'm impressed that it takes you a day and a half. So.
Well, I don't have five kiddos at home, so probably David's like in the 20 minutes in my household.
Yeah, I was going to say, once they hear the crinkle of the paper, it's gone.
Yeah. But for us, it was really just a commitment to sit there and say, look, I got to get this out of my house. And there was a conscious decision where we just kind of had to cut it off at the root. Now, you may not be that way. You may have more self-control than I do, but I know my heart and I knew where I was. And so I had to dig that sucker out and be done with it.
And so I found it was really helpful for my wife and I to be on the same page. So if one person's trying this and the other person isn't, so one person's buying all the Hostess snack cakes and stuff, and the other person say, well, veggies only, you're in trouble. You got to get on the same page together if you're married with your spouse there, and just make the determination together to work together on this.
So you can't eat a ho-ho and watch your wife do yoga.
I mean, you can.
Oh, mercy. All right. So let's switch topic here. What are you guys thinking about exercise? What kind of exercise does that play? What do you guys do? How are you guys incorporating that into your fitness?
Well, you want to go ahead, David? I'm sure you have a plan going on at the moment.
Actually, I do not. So what I would say is I've found it to be helpful to have some sort of workout plan. And there are a ton of different things you can do out there. I've done the Body for Life thing back in the day when that was popular. I've done the Beachbody thing, the P90X and P90X3. I've done those workout programs, and I enjoy all of those, but I'm not actually doing one of those right now. What I've found just kind of to be what works for me right now is putting an event on the calendar and training for an event. And so what I'm doing now, thanks to Anthony, he got me into cycling and my knees are very thankful, is putting a race, putting a rally up on the calendar and just training for it and doing it. Before that I was training for a half marathon. I'm planning to do another one at the end of this year. But for this summer, especially, I'm going to hit the bike. I've found enjoyment doing that. And I think that doing cardio is helpful. I think you do need to mix in some resistance training, but I think at the very least, and again, let's pull it all the way back to what's being helpful. At the very least, try and find a way. Listen, you've got time in your day to put in 30 minutes of some sort of cardiovascular exercise a week, 3 times. Whether that be just walking. Some of the easiest exercise you'll do is prayer walk your neighborhood. Just take your wife by the hand and go for a walk. Do something to get outside, to get your body moving, and you're going to feel better as the result.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, one of the things that helps me is doing that before I go into my study for sermon prep. Man, getting that blood flow like that, I need less coffee, I need less caffeine. My mind is more aware and awake. If I can elevate my heart rate for a little bit of time and get that blood moving, man, it's just like, it's so good for the way that I think and process things. And David's right. Start small. Go for a walk. Go for a jog. Do a sprint or two, and then just kind of work into it. Now, David's talking about running marathons and stuff like that, and that's really good. But man, don't try and do that at the beginning. Just go small. Do what you got to do. And even if you work out 15 minutes a day, that's better than not doing anything.
Right.
That's a step. Get there.
You can do a lot just by doing push-ups in the evening or some sit-ups.
Sure.
I mean, just by setting an increasing goal, I'm going to do 10 this week, 20 next month. Just that little bit does change quite a bit.
Well, and so it was what, 2 years ago when I decided I was going to try and take up running. And so the first week when I decided to do that, I kid you not, the first week of my running workout was 3 times a week. I walked a mile. That's it. Nothing special. I walked a mile. The next week, I walked a mile and a half 3 times a week. And so, and that's been my counsel when I've had guys reach out to me. I've had guys reach out to me and say, how do I get started in this? And my response to them is go for a walk. Get started doing that. As you walk and as you progress and as you build up a distance, then you might feel more comfortable breaking into a jog for a quarter mile or so. And so you just slowly, you begin by walking, you slowly turn little parts of that walk into a slow jog. You slowly add that together. It was a year before I ran a full mile without stopping.
Yeah.
And that was just me trying to take my time and ease into it, because my goal wasn't a short-term goal. My goal wasn't to get sore or to wear myself out or to injure myself. My goal was to become someone who runs. And so with that in mind, that's a long-term goal, not a short-term goal.
To become someone who runs. That was your goal?
Runners run.
Runners run. Just do it. Nike.
Hashtag runners run.
Whatever that meant. Oh man. For me, like David mentioned a minute ago, is setting up a goal to reach, something to do. And I'll tell you, man, people get addictive about some of this stuff, whether it's cycling or whether it's running marathons and stuff like that. And there is a ministry to be had there. And so one of the things that I saw within exercise was not only its benefit within me, but it was this challenge to be able to get with people who aren't normally in church, to get to a point where, you know, I'm creating atmosphere and spheres of influence outside of regular Christian circles. But then I'm challenging myself to accomplish something big. And so it was this really good thing for me as well. For me, I'm on a pretty strict training plan. I'm not a runner. I don't like running from things because the wicked run. We don't need to. I think the Bible says something about that. And so I'm not a runner. David's giving me this look like whatever. I am not a runner at all.
Next week's video is on taking verses out of context, but you go ahead.
We're not there yet, David. You gotta wait.
Yeah. I'm not a runner. I'm a cyclist by heart, and I found that to be just the way that I get out and do that. And it's funny because I've been doing it for about 2.5, 3 years. And when I very first started, I think the longest distance that I was celebrating on social media was like 6 miles, and I was super pumped about that. Well, now it's funny because my longer rides are close to 100 miles or 100 miles plus, depending on how much time I have and things like that. And it's been really cool because I would have never thought at the very beginning that I would get to the point I am now. And it's been a really cool journey. So wrapping all this up, get on a plan, have a goal, start slow, and just work into it. And the next thing you know, you're going to look up and go, oh my goodness, I'm at another level. This is really, really good. Yeah. And the Lord will bless that. So it's really cool. Okay. Sean, what about you, man? David and I have kind of talked a little bit. What about you? What are you doing now?
Man, I'm in a smaller town where there isn't a whole lot of that kind of activity going on. There's not like a big group or something that we can just join into, but I walk just about everywhere I go because it is a small town. The only exception to that is usually the grocery store. It's in walking distance, but I got kids and I got to carry groceries. I don't know. laziness, I guess. But still, so I like sprinting. I can't stand long distance running. Weightlifting is okay if I have a partner or somebody I like going with. But I enjoy sprinting when I can, and that's just always been since high school. So I like to do that. There's a road outside of our house that's about 100 meters in length, and so if I can sprint that, I'll keep up with that. At night, I try to do some push-ups before I go to bed, just in general, and do some stretching. In the morning, I do stretching and try to get myself loose before having to take off on the day. I find just those little things help me to stay in shape, but diet is still the biggest thing over exercise. While I was at seminary, I was doing a lot of exercise with no diet control and saw very little results from that. The minute my diet got in shape, the exercise took off. It got so much easier, and everything just felt better.
I hear you. You know, one of the hard things about a pastor's time is we're so limited on time. Let's talk to a practical aspect of ministry. How can a pastor lead his congregation to be healthier? And how can he do ministry in his church through these type of things? Because if we're juggling ministry and exercise, I know it's pretty hard to do. What are some ways that you're seeing pastors do that effectively?
Well, one of the things I've seen is a pastor that we all know named Bo up in North Texas. And one of the things that he does on Thursday nights is he's gathered a lot of the men in his church, a lot of the young families in his church, and they kind of do a soccer night ministry where they all get together and run around like crazy people and kick a soccer ball. I enjoy watching soccer. I don't know that that's something that I would be good at being a part of, but that's a neat idea. What have you seen, Anthony?
You know, one of the things I've seen pastors do is use it intentionally in their study time. I've heard of different guys going to their leadership, like their elder board or their deacons or just their personnel committee, and getting authorization to have an hour a day spent in the gym. And while they're there, they're committing to listening to like audiobooks on ministry and podcasts and things that would further their education and ministry, things that they're already doing already. But having that time set aside by their leadership where they can go and be out of the office and go spend some time investing in their health and investing in their education and stuff like that. And I think that's a fantastic way to be able to do that. So there are tons of ways for us to integrate ministry and fitness and health all together. And I think when we do this, we're really setting the bar for our people and showing them that they need to not only take care of their spiritual life, but they also need to take care of their health for the benefit of their families and the benefit of their own ministries and the witness that they have. And so it's all really good. Were you going to say something, David?
I was, and then I was thinking about it, but it's kind of what Paul says in 1 Timothy, where he talks about bodily training is of limited value, but training in godliness is good as in every way. I think we always jump to the second part of that verse, and we talk about how, but it's godliness, it's holiness, it's our spiritual development. That's the most important thing. And that's important to be sure, but he is saying that there is some value in bodily training. There is some value in health and fitness. And while we don't want to go overboard and make our entire ministry about, slimming up our congregation, and certainly we don't need to merely grow the congregation by growing the size of individual congregants. I do think it is an important part of our ministry to help our people live well.
Absolutely.
So
Paul also says to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 3:16, he says, do you not know that you are the temple of God and the Spirit of God dwells within you? You're a representation of God, and your body is that temple for the Spirit to dwell in. And we got to take care of that. We throw out that verse whenever we're doing something negative against ourselves, like if we have a tobacco habit or something like that. But we're not really throwing those verses out whenever we're eating fried chicken.
Right.
Like that. Right. So it's crazy. We have to have this balance between taking care of ourselves physically, making sure that we're investing spiritually, and we're doing it all for the glory of God.
Well, and I remember, again, going back to our very first question, Anthony, I remember when you had your wake-up call, right? So when you looked at the scale and had your had your moment of clarity. I remember having a conversation with you, and you brought up 1 Corinthians 9, that you brought up this idea of, I buffet my body, I discipline my body. And it's for the purpose that I might not disqualify myself.
Yeah.
I think there's a real aspect of fitness that gets overlooked in the hustle of ministry.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. We're going to wrap this thing up. If you have any other ideas on how you can be better fit as a pastor or incorporating fitness into ministry, make sure that you put them in the comments below. Also, make sure that you rate and subscribe on this channel. You're going to see some links come up on your screen in just a moment, and that will help you do that. And that way you can get alerted for future episodes and stay tuned to this conversation. Guys, we love you. We're praying for you, and you guys have a blessed week.